What if peace isn't something you find, but something you stop fighting against? We spend so much energy resisting what is, the change, the silence, the way people leave, the way life doesn't go according to plan. And yet the Buddha reminds us, it's not the pain that causes suffering, it's the resistance to pain. In this episode, we explore the invisible battle we all carry, the war against reality, and how surrendering that fight becomes the doorway to peace. You'll hear a Zen story about a farmer who no longer judged the sky, practices for softening the heart in real time, and a gentle invitation to let life move again, without your resistance in the way. If you're tired of clenching, tired of pushing through, subscribe to Lotus Light Teachings. Let's stop fighting the flow and learn to float. Part 1: The Subtle Fight. How resistance hides in our everyday life. It wasn't what happened that exhausted me. It was how hard I tried to make it stop happening. You wake up a little late, spill coffee on your shirt, traffic stretches endlessly, someone cuts in front of you, a message you hoped for doesn't arrive. None of it is catastrophic, but your body's already tight, your jaw is clenched, and somewhere behind your eyes, a quiet sentence repeats itself. This day isn't supposed to be like this. That's resistance. Not the kind that screams, not the kind that flips tables or slams doors, but the quiet, constant tightening inside you that says, life should be different than it is right now. It's subtle, like a muscle you didn't know you were flexing, until someone tells you to relax, and you realize how tired you are. We don't notice it at first. We think we're just stressed, or in a bad mood, or dealing with life. But underneath it all, we're at war with reality, fighting the traffic, resisting the rain, wishing people would behave differently, wishing we could behave differently. And every time the moment doesn't meet our mental picture, we add another layer of tension. The Buddha called this dukkha, the friction, the unsatisfactoriness that comes not from life itself, but from the way we push back against it, from the thought, this shouldn't be happening, even if what's happening is just a small discomfort, a delay, a silence, a shift in plans. Still, the mind resists, and the resistance becomes louder than the event itself. Here's the paradox. The more you try to get over it, the more you're trapped inside it. The more you try to stay calm, the more you judge yourself for not being calm. The more you try to force happiness, the more distant it feels. Why? Because resistance pretends to be helpful, but it's actually the thing that drains us. Imagine holding a beach ball underwater. You're using every muscle to keep it down. You're smiling on the surface, but underneath you're exhausted. That's what it's like to resist life. You don't have to scream. You just have to keep saying no, in tiny, invisible ways, and eventually you break. Not because life was too heavy, but because the fight never stopped. So pause with me here. What part of your day, your body, your breath is subtly saying, this shouldn't be happening? Can you hear it? And more importantly, can you soften it? Not fix it, not change it. Just breathe into the part of you that's tired of resisting everything. In the next part, we'll hear a Zen parable about a farmer who stopped blaming the sky and learned to trust the seasons. But for now, just sit. And if it helps, place a hand on your chest and whisper, maybe this too is okay. Part 2: The Zen Farmer, a story of surrender and trust. When you stop judging what happens, you stop suffering from it. There was once an old farmer who lived in a small village. He had one horse, strong, fast, and precious. It helped him plow the fields, carry his goods, and bring him to the market. One day, the horse ran away. The neighbors came, their voices filled with pity. "Oh no," they said, "such terrible luck." The farmer only shrugged. "Maybe," he replied softly. A few days later, the horse returned and brought with it 3 wild horses from the mountains. The neighbors came running again. "This is amazing," they cheered. "What great fortune you have." The farmer smiled, but simply said, "Maybe." Soon after, The farmer's son tried to tame one of the wild horses. The horse bucked wildly, and the boy fell, breaking his leg badly. The villagers shook their heads. How tragic! Your only son crippled. Such misfortune. The farmer looked at them kindly. Maybe, he said again. A week later, soldiers came to the village. A war had broken out. They took every able-bodied young man to the front lines, except the farmer's son, who was left behind because of his broken leg. The villagers returned once more, their voices hushed with awe. "You're so lucky," they whispered. "Your son was spared." And the farmer, still tending his fields, said only, "Maybe." You see, he didn't fight what happened. He didn't label it good or bad. He didn't resist the flow of events. He simply watched, responded, and trusted, because he understood something most of us forget. Life is not made of separate moments. It's a river, and if you judge it by one splash of water, you miss the way it moves. We all have our versions of the horse running away, the unexpected breakup, the job that didn't work out, the news we didn't want to hear, and immediately our minds shout, "This is wrong. This isn't fair. This should not be happening." But maybe, just maybe, we don't yet know what this moment is really about. Maybe what looks like loss is the first crack through which grace can enter. Maybe what looks like delay is life rearranging things for something deeper. Maybe what's happening isn't the problem. It's our resistance to it, our instant labeling of bad, that brings the suffering. The Zen farmer didn't have special powers. He simply had a different relationship with reality. He didn't collapse. He didn't pretend nothing mattered. He just stayed open. And in that openness, he became unshakable. So here's the question. Can you practice this kind of gentle neutrality? Not to become passive, but to become present. The next time something doesn't go your way, try saying softly to yourself, maybe I don't have to know yet. Maybe I don't have to fight this. Maybe this is not the enemy. In the next part, we'll look at how resistance makes things feel worse than they are, and how the act of clenching against discomfort actually feeds the pain we're trying to avoid. But for now, just breathe. Let the horse run. Let life reveal itself, one maybe at a time. Part 3, what we resist grows stronger. The more I tried to push it away, the louder it lived inside me. We think that by resisting something, we make it go away. But resistance doesn't dissolve pain. It feeds it. It wraps it in tension, judgment, and fear, and calls it coping. Think about it. The more you fear being misunderstood, the more you over-explain, and ironically come across as insecure. The more you're afraid of losing someone, the more you cling and drive them further away. The more you hate your anxiety, the more anxious you feel, because now you're anxious about being anxious. It becomes a loop, not because the feeling is wrong, but because your resistance has made it your enemy. There's a quiet war inside many of us. We resist sadness by forcing smiles. We resist rest by calling it laziness. We resist change by micromanaging the present. We call this being strong, but often it's just exhaustion wearing armor. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering, but he also pointed to its twin, aversion. Aversion is the silent flinch inside you that says, "This shouldn't be here." It's subtle, it's internal, but it's powerful, and over time, turns discomfort into distress, turns a passing wave into a drowning. There's a practice in some Buddhist traditions. When a painful emotion arises, instead of pushing it away, you name it gently. "Ah, this is fear. Ah, this is longing. Ah, this is shame." And then you say, "You're allowed to be here, not because you like it, but because resisting it makes it louder, and receiving it makes it human." Try it next time your chest tightens. Place a hand there, name what's present, and say softly, "I see you." You don't have to leave right away. You can sit with me a while. You'll notice something beautiful. The more you stop resisting the wave, the more it softens, because what we resist persists, but what we embrace transforms. So here's the invitation. Instead of judging the emotion, feel it. Instead of silencing the discomfort, get curious about it. Instead of running from what hurts, sit beside it like a friend. Because the moment you stop clenching, your inner world begins to breathe again. In the next part, we'll explore what real acceptance looks like, and how it's not weakness or giving up, but a return to something far stronger than control, presence. But for now, just ask gently, what am I resisting today? And what might happen if I didn't? Part 4, acceptance is not giving up, it's coming home. When I stopped fighting the moment, I finally felt safe inside it. There's a moment in every inner journey where we ask ourselves a quiet question. If I stop resisting, does that mean I've given up? We're taught to push, to fix, to hustle, to keep going no matter what. So when we finally sit down, when we finally breathe and say, okay, part of us whispers, is this surrender or is this failure? But here's the truth. Acceptance is not weakness. It's wisdom. Imagine this. You're caught in a rainstorm. First, you run. You duck under doorways. You curse the sky. You're soaked, angry, fighting every drop. Then something shifts. You stop. You lift your face to the sky. You laugh. You let the rain fall on your skin. Nothing outside changed, but something inside you did. You accepted what is, and suddenly you were no longer drowning. You were dancing. That's the shift. Acceptance doesn't change the moment. It changes your relationship with the moment. It turns resistance into presence. Turns struggle into softness. Turns fear into curiosity. The Buddha didn't tell us to accept life because everything is perfect. He taught us to accept life because fighting reality creates suffering. Just as a rock is not moved by the wind, he said, the wise are not moved by praise or blame, joy or sorrow. Why? Because they're not constantly resisting what is. They're not at war with the weather of their lives. Acceptance isn't passive. It's deeply alive. It says, I may not like this, but I don't have to destroy myself trying to undo it. This may not be the path I wanted, but I can walk it mindfully. This isn't the version of me I imagined, but I can love her anyway. One of the most powerful things you can do is look at what's happening and say without flinching, this too belongs. Not because it's pleasant, but because it's true. And from that truth, you stop needing to escape your life. You start living it, fully, honestly, gently. So here's a practice. Today, when something unexpected happens, a delay, a difficult conversation, a wave of emotion, don't rush to fix it. Pause. Place your hand on your heart. Breathe and whisper, I don't have to change this right now. I just have to be with it. Because that moment right there is home. In the next part, we'll explore how to make this presence practical, how to meet resistance as it arises, and gently soften into the body, the breath, the now. Because presence isn't an idea, it's a practice, and it begins with one conscious breath. Part 5, the practice, softening into the moment. I didn't need to force peace. I just had to stop resisting what was already here. Let's pause. Wherever you are, just pause. Notice the weight of your body. Notice your shoulders, your jaw, your stomach. Are you holding anything? A conversation? A worry? A hidden demand for things to be different? Now take a breath. Not a perfect one, not a deep one, just real. Breathe in, and without changing anything, breathe out. Feel the moment arrive just as it is, and whisper quietly to yourself, this moment can stay. This is where transformation begins, not by trying harder, but by softening. Softening the need to fix, softening the urge to figure it all out, softening the stories that say, it shouldn't be this way. Instead, letting the moment simply be what it is. There's a simple phrase I return to in practice. This too belongs. The tension, the noise, the confusion, the quiet ache behind your ribs. You don't need to banish them. You don't need to make them spiritual or beautiful. You just need to let them exist without pushing them out the door. And as soon as you do, something miraculous happens. You stop feeling separate from your own life. You become one with what's happening. In Buddhist practice, there's a word, citta. It means heart-mind, not heart or mind, but both together. Your thoughts and your feelings held gently in awareness, like a child being rocked in safe arms. This is what you offer yourself in practice. A space where nothing has to perform. A space where you don't have to resist yourself anymore. So here's a practice you can carry whenever you notice resistance rising. The tightening, the clenching, the "I can't take this." Pause, touch your chest, breathe, and say silently, "May I soften in this moment. May I let go of needing things to change. May I trust that even this has a place." And you know what? You don't have to do this perfectly. You just have to remember, every time you soften, even just a little, you invite peace back home, not as an achievement, but as a natural state beneath the fight. In the final part of this journey, we'll return to the heart of the message. When you stop resisting, you don't just find peace. You realize peace was there the whole time, waiting for you to open the door. Part 6. When you stop resisting, life starts flowing. I didn't fall apart when I stopped resisting. I fell into life. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from fixing everything around you. Comes the moment you stop pushing, the moment you let go of the need to make the day perfect, to make others understand, to make your heart hurry up and heal. And instead you whisper, "Let it be what it is." That's when life begins to move again. Not because it suddenly got easier, but because you stopped standing in your own way. Like a river that's been dammed up for years, the moment you lift the gates, the current returns, not to drown you, but to carry you somewhere softer, somewhere true. So many of us live braced, like we're waiting for impact. We resist joy because we fear it won't last. We resist stillness because we're afraid of what might surface. We resist surrender because we think it means we're weak. But here's what the Buddha knew. It's not surrender to life that weakens us. It's the refusal to flow with it. When you stop resisting your pain, teaches you. When you stop resisting uncertainty, you discover trust. When you stop resisting yourself, you finally feel at home. I once heard a Zen teacher say, "The way out of the storm is not to run. It's to become still enough, to feel where the wind is trying to take you." And maybe that's the secret. Life is not against you. It's just been trying to move you while you were too busy holding the brakes. So now, pause. Let go of the grip you've kept so long. You forgot what it's like to unclench. Feel your shoulders drop. Feel your breath return. Feel the space open in your chest as the fight begins to fade. And ask yourself, what part of me has been pushing so hard that it forgot how to receive? You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to force clarity. You just need to soften into the river that has always been flowing. Because when you stop resisting life, life begins to carry you toward places you didn't know you were ready for. Places of peace, places of presence, places that feel like you. Sparkles. In the final few breaths of this episode, you don't need to do anything. Just breathe. Let the moment arrive. And whisper if it feels true. I'm ready to stop fighting. I'm ready to trust the flow. And from this soft, silent place, life begins again. Not because you made it happen, but because you finally let it. So maybe the answer isn't try harder. Maybe it's let go softer. Maybe peace isn't what happens when life finally listens to us, but what returns when we start listening to life. Because every time you unclench, you open. And every time you open, you begin to heal. Sparkles. If this episode softened a place in you, tell us in the comments, what have you been resisting that you're finally ready to receive? And if you'd like more stories like this, more quiet companions along your path, subscribe to Lotus Light Teachings and walk with us, week by week, breath by breath, homeward.